Samuel Washington had been driving the same route for 30 years. Every second Tuesday of the month, he would wake up early, put on his best shirt, and drive his old Honda Civic to the bank downtown. At 72, he still believed in doing things the old-fashioned way. No online banking, no credit cards for big purchases. Cash was real. Cash was safe. Cash was something you could hold in your hands and know exactly what you had. This particular Tuesday started like any other. Samuel carefully folded his bank withdrawal slip and placed it in his wallet next to his driver's license. The envelope containing $3,200 sat on the passenger seat. It was his monthly routine, collecting his pension and Social Security benefits in cash. His late wife Betty had always worried about this habit, but Samuel trusted banks about as much as he trusted politicians. The morning sun painted golden streaks across his windshield as he drove through the familiar streets of his neighborhood. Samuel knew every pothole, every stop sign, every house along the way. He had lived in this community for 4 decades, watching it change, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but it was home. At the intersection of Maple and 3rd Street, Samuel slowed down and carefully turned left, just as he had done countless times before. His turn signal clicked rhythmically, and he checked his mirrors twice before making the turn. Betty always said he was the most cautious driver she knew. "You drive like you're carrying precious cargo," she used to tease him. The blue and red lights appeared in his rearview mirror less than a block later. Samuel's heart skipped a beat, but he remained calm. He had been pulled over maybe 3 times in his entire life, always for minor issues, always resolved quickly and politely. He pulled over to the curb, turned off his engine, and placed his hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. His father had taught him this when he first learned to drive back in 1968. "Keep your hands visible, speak respectfully, and follow instructions," the old man had said. "It's the safest way." Officer Jake Martinez approached the driver's side window while his partner, Derek Stone, positioned himself near the rear of the vehicle. Samuel rolled down his window and waited. "License and registration," Martinez said without any greeting. "Good morning, officer," Samuel replied politely, reaching slowly for his wallet. "May I ask what I did wrong?" Martinez watched Samuel's movements closely. "You failed to signal back there at the intersection." Samuel paused, confused. He distinctly remembered using his turn signal. He always used his turn signal, but he wasn't about to argue with a police officer on the side of the road. "I'm sorry, officer. I thought I had signaled, but I might have been mistaken." After examining Samuel's license and registration, Martinez returned to his patrol car. Samuel could see him talking on the radio, though he couldn't hear what was being said. Officer Stone remained near the back of the Honda, occasionally walking around the vehicle and peering through the windows. When Martinez returned, his demeanor had changed. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." "Is there a problem, officer?" "Just step out of the car, please." Samuel complied, moving slowly due to the arthritis in his knees. The morning air was crisp and he wished he had brought his jacket. "Do you have anything illegal in the vehicle?" Martinez asked. "No, sir. Nothing illegal at all. Any weapons? Drugs? Large amounts of cash?" The question about cash made Samuel's stomach tighten. The envelope on his passenger seat suddenly felt like it was glowing. "Just my monthly banking money," he said honestly. "Nothing illegal about that." Martinez and Stone exchanged glances. "We're going to need to search your vehicle." Samuel's mouth went dry. "Do you need a warrant for that?" "Not if we have probable cause," Stone spoke for the first time. "And your nervous behavior is giving us probable cause." "I'm not nervous," Samuel said, though his voice betrayed him slightly. "I just don't understand why you need to search my car for a turn signal violation." But the officers were already moving. Martinez opened the passenger door and immediately spotted the envelope. Samuel watched as the officer picked it up, felt its thickness, and looked inside. "Well, what do we have here?" Martinez called out to his partner. Samuel felt his world starting to tilt. "That's my banking money. I have all the paperwork to prove it." Stone joined Martinez at the passenger side. They spoke in low voices, occasionally glancing at Samuel. Finally, Martinez walked back over. "Sir, this is a substantial amount of cash. In our experience, people don't usually carry this much money unless they're involved in illegal activities." "I can explain exactly where that money came from," Samuel said, his voice rising slightly. "I have bank withdrawal slips, identification, everything you need to verify it's legitimate." The thing is, Stone said, stepping closer, cash like this is often connected to drug transactions. Even if you're not directly involved, this money might have come from illegal sources. Samuel felt like he was in a nightmare. Officers, please. I'm 72 years old. I collect my pension and Social Security every month and withdraw it in cash. I've been doing this for years. My bank can verify everything. Martinez shook his head. I'm afraid we can't take that risk. We're going to have to confiscate this money as potential drug proceeds. You can't do that. Samuel's composure finally cracked. That's my money. That's how I pay my bills, buy my medicine, buy my food. Calm down, sir, Stone said, his hand moving toward his belt. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Samuel forced himself to lower his voice, remembering his father's advice about staying safe during police encounters. Please, officers, call the bank. Check my records. I can prove this money is legitimate. But Martinez was already sealing the envelope in an evidence bag. You'll receive paperwork explaining how to contest the forfeiture. If you can prove the money is legitimate, you might be able to get it back. Might? Samuel repeated, incredulous. Civil asset forfeiture is the law, Stone explained. When we have reason to believe money is connected to illegal activity, we have the right to seize it for investigation. Samuel watched helplessly as his monthly income disappeared into the back of the patrol car. $3,200 that represented his rent, his groceries, his medicine, his small pleasures like dinner at the diner on Sundays. Gone. The officers handed him a citation for failing to signal and a receipt for the seized money. The receipt listed the amount as approximately $3,000 instead of the actual $3,200. Samuel started to point out the discrepancy, but something in the officer's expressions warned him to stay quiet. Have a good day, sir, Martinez said as they prepared to leave. Remember to use your turn signals. Samuel stood on the sidewalk for a long time after the patrol car disappeared, holding the citation and receipt in his trembling hands. Cars passed by, their drivers probably wondering why an old man was standing alone on the curb looking lost. Finally, he got back in his Honda and drove home, his mind racing with questions and fears. How was he going to pay his rent? How would he buy his heart medication? How could two police officers just take his money without any proof of wrongdoing? As he pulled into his driveway, Samuel realized that his simple banking routine had just become the worst day of his life. But he had no idea that somewhere across town, in a corner office at police headquarters, his own son was about to discover what had happened to him. The next morning, Samuel woke up hoping it had all been a bad dream. But the citation and seizure receipt on his kitchen table told him otherwise. He made his coffee with shaking hands, the reality of his situation settling in like a weight on his chest. $3,200 was gone, and he had no idea how to get it back. After breakfast, Samuel drove to the police station. The building looked different now, more intimidating than it had seemed during community meetings and charity events over the years. The front desk officer, a young woman with tired eyes, barely looked up when he approached. I need to file a complaint, Samuel said, placing the seizure receipt on the counter. She glanced at the paper. What kind of complaint? 2 officers took my money yesterday during a traffic stop. They said it was connected to drugs, but it wasn't. It's my legitimate banking money and I need it back. The desk officer sighed and pulled out a thick form. Fill this out completely. Make sure to include the case number from your receipt. Someone will contact you within 10 business days. Samuel spent an hour filling out the form, describing every detail he could remember about the traffic stop. His handwriting, once neat and precise, looked shaky on the paper. When he finished, the desk officer stamped it and placed it in a large pile of similar forms. What happens next? Samuel asked. Someone will review your complaint and contact you. How long does that usually take? She shrugged. Could be a few weeks. Could be longer. Depends on the case. Samuel left the police station feeling more frustrated than when he arrived. At home, he called the number on the seizure receipt. After being transferred 4 times, he reached someone who claimed to handle asset forfeiture cases. Yes, Mr. Washington, I see your case here, the voice said. Officers Martinez and Stone reported seizing suspected drug money during a traffic stop. It wasn't drug money, Samuel insisted. I have bank records proving where the money came from. You'll need to provide documentation proving the legitimacy of the funds. Do you have receipts, bank statements, tax records? Of course I do. Can I bring them to you today? You'll need to mail them to our office. Include copies of everything, along with a written statement explaining the source of the money. We'll review your submission and determine if there's sufficient evidence to return the funds. Samuel spent the rest of the day gathering documents. Bank withdrawal slips, social security statements, pension records, even grocery receipts showing his normal spending patterns. He made copies of everything and drove to the post office to send them certified mail. Days turned into weeks. Samuel called the police department every few days, only to be told his case was under review. His daughter, Denise, who worked as a nurse at the county hospital, tried to help by calling local news stations. It's not really news, one reporter told her. Civil asset forfeiture happens all the time. Unless there's something really unusual about your father's case, we probably won't cover it. Samuel's monthly bills started arriving. His rent, his car insurance, his prescription medications. The money he had saved for these expenses was locked away in some evidence room, treated like criminal proceeds. He borrowed money from Denise, but she had her own family to support and couldn't help indefinitely. The stress began taking its toll on Samuel's health. He had always been proud of his independence, of never needing help from anyone. Now at 72, he felt helpless and defeated. His blood pressure medication ran out, but he couldn't afford to refill it. His hands shook more frequently, and he found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering how his life had changed so dramatically in a single morning. During one of his visits to the police station, Samuel met Mrs. Chen, an elderly Chinese woman who was there for a similar reason. Her grandson had been pulled over while driving her car, and officers had seized $800 she kept in the glove compartment for emergencies. Like Samuel, she had been waiting weeks for a resolution. They treat us like criminals, Mrs. Chen said sadly. I worked my whole life, saved every penny, and now they act like my money is dirty. Samuel realized he wasn't alone. Other people in his neighborhood had similar stories. Mr. Rodriguez down the street had lost $2,000 during a traffic stop 6 months ago, and still hadn't gotten it back. The young man at the corner market said his uncle had been through the same thing. It seemed like a pattern, and Samuel started to wonder if these weren't random encounters but something more systematic. Most of the victims were older, most were people of color, and most lived in the same general area of the city. After 6 weeks of getting nowhere with phone calls and forms, Samuel decided to visit the police station every day. He would arrive each morning at opening time and politely ask for an update on his case. The desk officers began to recognize him, and some seemed sympathetic, but they all gave him the same response. Your case is still under review. One morning, a sergeant came out to talk to him. Mr. Washington, I understand your frustration, but calling every day and coming in every day isn't going to speed up the process. Sergeant, that money represents my ability to live independently. Without it, I can't pay my bills, can't buy my medicine. How long would you wait if someone took your monthly income? The sergeant looked uncomfortable. I understand, but there are procedures we have to follow. What procedures? I've provided every document you asked for. I've proven the money was legitimate. What more do I need to do? The investigating officers need to complete their report. Until then, the money stays in evidence. Samuel learned that Officers Martinez and Stone were the ones responsible for completing the paperwork that would either return his money or officially forfeit it to the state. But every time he asked about speaking to them directly, he was told they were unavailable. As the weeks stretched into months, Samuel's savings dwindled. He stopped eating out, stopped buying anything beyond basic necessities. His small apartment felt like a prison, and his independence felt like a memory from another life. Denise tried to convince him to hire a lawyer, but Samuel had looked into it. Attorney fees for asset forfeiture cases often cost more than the seized money itself. Most lawyers wanted several $1,000s up front, money Samuel didn't have and couldn't afford to borrow. One evening, as Samuel sat at his kitchen table looking at yet another overdue notice, he wondered if this was how his story would end, not with the dignity and peace he had imagined for his golden years, but with bureaucratic defeat and financial ruin. He thought about his late wife Betty and what she would say about all this. She had always been the fighter in their relationship, the one who stood up to authority when she thought something was wrong. Don't let them walk all over you, Sam, she would have said. You work too hard and live too honestly to let them treat you like a criminal. But Samuel felt like he was fighting a system designed to wear him down. to make him give up and accept his loss. Every form led to another form. Every phone call led to another waiting period. Every visit to the police station led to the same non-answers. Still, he refused to give up completely. Every morning he would look at Betty's picture on the dresser and promise her he would keep fighting. He owed it to her memory, to his own dignity, and to every other elderly person who might face the same injustice. What Samuel didn't know was that his case file had crossed the desk of someone who would change everything. Someone who had the power to investigate what had really happened during that traffic stop. Someone who had spent years trying to reform the very system that had victimized him, and that someone was about to discover that the elderly man fighting for his money was closer to him than he ever could have imagined. Detective Captain Michael Washington sat in his corner office at police headquarters, reviewing the monthly asset forfeiture reports. It was a routine task that most supervisors delegated to subordinates, but Michael believed in handling these reviews personally. He had seen too many cases where seized assets disappeared into administrative black holes, and too many stories of legitimate money taken from innocent people. Michael had worked his way up through the ranks over 20 years, earning respect through fair leadership and an unwavering commitment to proper procedure. He had joined the force with idealistic dreams of serving his community, and while those dreams had been tested many times, he still believed that good police work could make a difference. As he scrolled through the digital case files, one name stopped him cold: Samuel Washington. Michael stared at the screen, his heart racing. The address matched. The age matched. The description matched. After 8 years of minimal contact, his father's name was staring back at him from an asset forfeiture report. The case summary was brief and clinical. Traffic stop for failure to signal. Large amount of cash discovered during vehicle search. Suspected drug proceeds seized pending investigation. But Michael knew his father had never touched drugs in his life, had barely even taken aspirin unless absolutely necessary. Michael's relationship with his father had been complicated for years. When Michael first joined the police force, Samuel had been proud. But as Michael rose through the ranks, their relationship had grown strained. Samuel had lived through the civil rights era and never fully trusted the police, even when his own son wore the badge. Michael, trying to prove himself without any appearance of favoritism, had distanced himself from his family connections. The distance had grown wider after Michael's mother Betty passed away 3 years ago. Samuel had wanted his son at the funeral, had needed his support during the darkest period of his life. But Michael had been in the middle of a major corruption investigation that required his full attention. He had attended the funeral but left immediately afterward, telling himself that the job came first. Samuel never said anything about feeling abandoned, but the hurt in his eyes had been clear. Now, reading the case file, Michael realized how much he had lost track of his father's daily life. The seizure had happened 2 months ago. 2 months of his 72-year-old father trying to navigate the bureaucratic maze alone, probably too proud to ask for help from the son who had chosen his career over his family. Michael pulled up the complete case file. The investigating officers were Martinez and Stone, 2 patrol officers who had recently caught his attention for all the wrong reasons. Their seizure numbers were unusually high, and their cases seemed to disproportionately target elderly residents in lower-income neighborhoods. The paperwork for his father's case was minimal. No follow-up investigation had been conducted. No contact with the bank to verify Samuel's story. No review of his financial history. The money was simply sitting in evidence, treated as guilty until proven innocent. Michael's hands trembled as he printed out the file. He wanted to rush to his father's house immediately, but he forced himself to think like a cop first. If Martinez and Stone were running some kind of scheme, approaching them without evidence would only give them time to cover their tracks. He started by pulling security footage from businesses near the intersection where the traffic stop occurred. It took several hours and multiple phone calls, but Michael eventually found a camera angle that showed the intersection clearly. The timestamp matched the citation perfectly. The footage showed Samuel's Honda approaching the intersection, slowing down, and turning left with a clear turn signal visible. The patrol car had been parked nearby, pulling out to follow Samuel immediately after the turn. There had been no traffic violation. Michael's jaw tightened as he watched the video again. Martinez and Stone had lied in their report. They had targeted his father without cause. probably because he looked like an easy victim, an elderly black man driving alone through a neighborhood they patrolled regularly. Next, Michael contacted Samuel's bank. The branch manager, recognizing Michael's badge and official credentials, provided records showing Samuel's monthly routine of withdrawing his pension and Social Security benefits in cash. The pattern went back years, completely contradicting any suggestion of suspicious financial activity. As Michael dug deeper, a disturbing pattern emerged. Martinez and Stone had made similar seizures from at least 6 other elderly residents in the past year. All the victims were minorities. All lived in the same general area. All had been pulled over for minor traffic violations that the security footage contradicted. More troubling still, the amounts reported in the seizure receipts didn't always match the amounts actually logged into evidence. In Samuel's case, the receipt showed approximately $3,000, while the evidence log showed exactly $2,800. $200 had simply disappeared. Michael realized he was looking at systematic corruption. Martinez and Stone weren't just making questionable seizures, they were stealing portions of the money they confiscated. They had turned civil asset forfeiture into their personal ATM, targeting vulnerable citizens who were unlikely to fight back effectively. The weight of the discovery settled on Michael's shoulders like a physical burden. This wasn't just about police misconduct. It was about his own father becoming a victim while Michael had been too focused on his career to notice or care. That evening, Michael sat in his car outside Samuel's apartment building for 20 minutes before working up the courage to go inside. He hadn't been to his father's home since Betty's funeral. The hallway smelled the same, a mixture of cooking spices and cleaning products. But Samuel looked older when he opened the door. "Michael?" Samuel's voice carried surprise and caution. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Dad." Samuel stepped aside to let him enter. The apartment looked smaller than Michael remembered, and he noticed things he had missed before. The generic brands in the kitchen, the careful way his father had arranged furniture to hide worn spots in the carpet, the prescription bottles lined up on the counter with dates showing they hadn't been refilled recently. "I know about the traffic stop," Michael said finally. Samuel's shoulders sagged. "How did you find out?" "Your case file crossed my desk." "Dad, why didn't you call me?" Samuel looked away. "You made it pretty clear that police business comes before family business. Besides, what could you do? Your own officers took my money. I figured calling you would just put you in an awkward position." The words hit Michael harder than any physical blow. His father was right. Michael had chosen his career over his relationships, had built walls between his professional and personal life so high that his own father couldn't reach him during a crisis. "I'm sorry," Michael said quietly. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when Mom died, and I'm sorry I wasn't there when this happened to you." Samuel studied his son's face. "You look tired, Michael. This job is wearing you down. The job is fine. It's the people in the job who are the problem." Michael pulled out the case file. "Dad, I need you to tell me exactly what happened during that traffic stop. Every detail you can remember." As Samuel recounted the experience, Michael took notes and asked follow-up questions. His father's memory was sharp, his observations detailed. By the time they finished, Michael had a clear picture of what had occurred, and it bore no resemblance to the official report filed by Martinez and Stone. "What happens now?" Samuel asked. Michael looked at his father, really looked at him, for the first time in years. Samuel had always been strong, proud, independent. Now he looked fragile, worn down by months of bureaucratic fights and financial stress. The injustice of it made Michael's chest burn with anger. "Now I do what I should have done 20 years ago," Michael said. "I put family first and I make this right." But even as he made the promise, Michael knew it wouldn't be simple. Investigating fellow officers was career suicide in many departments. Going after Martinez and Stone would create enemies, probably cost him promotions, possibly even his job. Still, looking at his father's tired face, Michael realized some things mattered more than career advancement. Some fights were worth having regardless of the personal cost. "There's something else, Dad," Michael said as he prepared to leave. "This wasn't random. Martinez and Stone have done this to other people in the neighborhood. You weren't targeted because of anything you did wrong. You were targeted because they thought you'd be an easy victim." Samuel nodded slowly. "I wondered about that. Met some other folks at the police station with similar stories. Well, they picked the wrong victim this time, Michael said, surprising himself with the determination in his own voice. They had no idea they were messing with the police chief's father. For the first time in months, Samuel smiled. Chief, when did that happen? Last month. I've been meaning to call you. Michael felt heat rise in his cheeks. I guess I have a lot of catching up to do. As Michael drove home that night, he felt like he was seeing his city differently. How many other elderly residents had been victimized while he sat in his office reviewing paperwork? How many families had been destroyed by officers who saw badges as licenses to steal? Tomorrow he would begin the process of bringing down Martinez and Stone. It would be complicated, potentially dangerous, and certainly career-limiting. But for the first time in years, Michael felt like he was about to do police work that actually mattered. The fight for his father's money had become a fight for the soul of his department. And Michael Washington was finally ready to choose the right side. Michael spent the next week building an airtight case against Martinez and Stone. He pulled traffic camera footage from multiple locations, interviewed business owners who had witnessed similar stops, and carefully documented the pattern of seizures targeting elderly residents. What he discovered made his stomach turn. The two officers had refined their operation into a system. They would park near banks on days when Social Security and pension checks typically arrived, then follow elderly customers who made cash withdrawals. The traffic stops that followed were always for minor violations that couldn't be verified. Failure to signal, following too closely expired inspection stickers that were actually current. During searches, they would pocket some cash before officially logging the seizure, knowing that confused elderly victims were unlikely to challenge discrepancies in paperwork. They barely understood. Over the past 18 months, Michael estimated they had stolen at least $40,000 from victims while officially seizing nearly double that amount for the department. The evidence was overwhelming, but Michael knew that confronting fellow officers required careful handling. Internal affairs investigations could take months, and in the meantime, Martinez and Stone might destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses. Michael decided on a direct approach. He called both officers into his office on a Friday afternoon, telling them he needed to discuss their high seizure numbers for budget planning purposes. Martinez arrived first, settling into the chair across from Michael's desk with casual confidence. Chief Washington, Martinez said with a slight smile, heard congratulations are in order on the promotion. Thank you, Michael replied, studying the officer's face. Martinez was younger than Michael, maybe 35, with the kind of swagger that came from years of wielding authority without oversight. I wanted to talk to you about some of your recent asset forfeiture cases. Sure thing. Stone and I have been pretty successful in that area. Gets a lot of drug money off the streets. Michael opened a file folder. Tell me about the Samuel Washington case from 2 months ago. Martinez didn't flinch. Elderly black male, traffic violation, large amount of cash in the vehicle, textbook drug money seizure. Large amount of cash, Michael repeated. How much exactly? 3,000, give or take. The old guy claimed it was legitimate, but they all say that. The seizure receipt shows approximately 3,000, but you logged 2,800 into evidence. What happened to the other 200? For the first time, Martinez looked uncomfortable. Must have been a counting error. You know how it is with loose bills. Michael leaned back in his chair. I know how it is, Martinez. The question is, do you? Before Martinez could respond, Stone knocked and entered. He was older than his partner, maybe 42, with graying hair and the tired look of someone counting days until retirement. He took the seat next to Martinez, glancing between them as if sensing tension. Stone, Michael said. I was just asking Martinez about the Samuel Washington seizure. You were his backup that day. Stone nodded slowly. Yeah, I remember. Old guy with a lot of cash. Seemed suspicious. Suspicious how? Well, you know. Elderly black man driving through that neighborhood with thousands in cash. In our experience, that usually means drugs. Michael felt heat rising in his chest but kept his voice level. In your experience, elderly black men are usually drug dealers? Stone backtracked quickly. Not necessarily drug dealers, but the money often comes from drug sales even if they're just holding it for someone else. I see. Michael pulled out a photograph. This is security footage from the intersection where you stopped Mr. Washington. Can you tell me what traffic violation you observed? Both officers leaned forward to look at the still image, which clearly showed Samuel's turn signal activated. Martinez cleared his throat. Sometimes the footage doesn't capture everything. We observed the violation from our patrol position. Your patrol position, Michael repeated. Which was where exactly? We were, southbound on Maple when we observed the violation. Michael pulled out another photograph showing the patrol car's actual position. This image shows your vehicle parked in the bank parking lot facing the intersection. You weren't southbound on Maple, you were waiting and watching. The room fell silent. Stone shifted in his chair while Martinez stared at the photograph as if willing it to change. Chief, Martinez said finally, I think there might be some confusion about the timeline. The only confusion here is why two experienced officers would lie in their report about a traffic stop. Michael's voice hardened. But we're just getting started. Let me ask you about Mrs. Chen, Mr. Rodriguez, and about 6 other elderly residents you've targeted in the past year. Stone's face went pale. Chief, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that I have security footage, bank records, and witness statements proving that you've been systematically targeting elderly residents for fraudulent traffic stops and illegal seizures. Michael opened his desk drawer and removed an evidence bag containing cash. I'm also telling you that this morning I had the bills from your seizures tested for fingerprints. Care to guess whose prints showed up on money that should have gone directly from the suspects to the evidence room? Martinez jumped to his feet. You can't fingerprint evidence without proper authorization. Sit down, Martinez. Michael's command carried the full weight of his authority. I'm the chief of police. I can authorize whatever testing I deem necessary for an ongoing investigation. Both officers remained standing, their panic now visible. Stone's hands were shaking slightly. Here's what's going to happen, Michael continued. You're both going to write detailed confessions about your asset forfeiture scheme. You're going to return every penny you've stolen with interest, and you're going to resign from this department immediately. And if we don't? Martinez challenged, though his voice lacked conviction. Michael stood up, his 6'2" frame imposing in the small office. If you don't, I'll have you arrested for theft, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and whatever other charges the district attorney wants to file. You'll face criminal prosecution, civil lawsuits from your victims, and probably federal charges since you violated people's constitutional rights under color of authority. Stone sank back into his chair. Chief, please. I've got 18 years on the job. I was planning to retire in 2 years. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from elderly citizens. Michael's voice carried no sympathy. Mr. Rodriguez couldn't afford his heart medication for 3 months because of money you stole. Mrs. Chen had to move in with her daughter because she couldn't pay rent. These aren't just numbers on a report. These are real people whose lives you destroyed. Martinez was still standing, his face flushed with anger. You know what this is really about? This is about Samuel Washington. We had no idea he was your father when we stopped him. The admission hung in the air like a bomb. Michael felt every muscle in his body tense. What did you just say? Stone grabbed Martinez's arm. Shut up, Jake. But Martinez was beyond stopping. That's right. We found out afterward that we'd seized money from the chief's daddy. Is that why you're really doing this? Because we embarrassed your family? Michael walked around his desk slowly, stopping directly in front of Martinez. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. Officer Martinez, you just admitted to knowingly filing false reports and stealing from citizens. You also just revealed that you knew about my relationship to one of your victims and attempted to use that knowledge to intimidate me. Michael paused, letting the implication sink in. But here's what you don't understand. This isn't about my father being a victim. This is about the fact that you've been victimizing innocent people for months, and I took an oath to protect those people. Martinez's confidence finally cracked. Chief, we can work something out. We can make this right. You're absolutely going to make this right. Both of you are going to face the consequences of your actions. The only question is whether you do it the easy way or the hard way. Stone looked up with desperate eyes. What's the easy way? Michael returned to his desk and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. Full written confessions. Complete restitution to all victims. Immediate resignations. In exchange, I'll recommend minimum jail time and no federal prosecution. And the hard way? Michael picked up his phone. I call the district attorney right now and you both get arrested on felony charges. Your cases go to trial. Your victims testify about what you did to them. And you face maximum sentences. The 2 officers looked at each other. Years of partnership reduced to this moment of mutual recognition that their careers were over. Stone spoke first. "I'll take the easy way." Martinez stared at his partner with betrayal in his eyes, but after a long moment he nodded. "Me too." As Michael watched them sign their confessions, he thought about his father sitting at home, probably wondering if his money would ever be returned. Samuel had trusted the system to work, had followed every procedure, had maintained his dignity even when treated like a criminal. Tomorrow, Michael would drive to his father's apartment with a check for the full amount, plus interest. He would also bring an apology, not just for the money, but for allowing a system to exist where officers could prey on vulnerable citizens. But tonight, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like a real police officer again. The next morning, Michael sat in his office staring at the cashier's check on his desk. $3,400. Samuel's original money plus interest and a penalty payment for Martinez and Stone's personal accounts. It was more money than his father had lost. But Michael knew it could never truly compensate for months of stress, humiliation, and financial hardship. The confessions from both officers had been detailed and damning. They admitted to systematically targeting elderly residents, falsifying traffic violations, and stealing portions of seized cash. Stone had broken down completely during his confession, admitting that he had gotten into gambling debt and saw the seizures as an easy way to make extra money. Martinez had been colder, more calculating, treating the thefts as a business opportunity. Both men had been arrested that morning, despite their cooperation. Michael had recommended minimal jail time, but the district attorney wanted to send a message about police corruption. They would likely serve 6 months each, lose their pensions, and face civil lawsuits from their victims. Michael's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Chief Washington, this is Detective Rivera from Internal Affairs. I wanted to update you on the Martinez-Stone investigation." "Go ahead." "We've identified 11 total victims over the past 18 months. The total amount stolen was just over $47,000. We're working with the DA's office to return money to all the victims." "Good. What about departmental changes?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you. This case has exposed some serious gaps in our oversight procedures. Asset forfeiture seizures have been happening with minimal supervision. I think we need new protocols." Michael had been thinking about the same thing. "Schedule a meeting with all division heads for Monday morning. We're going to completely overhaul how we handle seizures." After ending the call, Michael picked up the cashier's check and drove to his father's apartment. Samuel answered the door wearing his best shirt, as if he had been expecting important company. "Michael, come in." The apartment looked different than it had a week ago. Samuel had clearly been preparing for something. The furniture was arranged more formally, and there was a manila folder on the coffee table filled with documents. "Dad, what's all this?" Samuel gestured to the folder. "Bank statements, receipts, tax returns, everything proving that my money was legitimate. I figured if you were really going to help me, you'd need proper documentation." Michael felt a stab of emotion. His father had spent hours organizing paperwork for a case that was already resolved, still not quite believing that his son had enough power or influence to make things right. "You won't need any of that," Michael said, holding out the check. "Your money has been returned plus interest." Samuel took the check with trembling hands, staring at the amount. "This is more than they took. It's what you deserved. The officers who stole from you have been arrested and charged. They'll both go to jail." Samuel sank into his armchair, still holding the check. "Arrested? Dad, they weren't just stealing from you. They were running a scheme, targeting elderly people throughout the neighborhood. You were one of 11 victims." 11? Samuel's voice was quiet. "All elderly folks? All elderly, all minorities, all people they thought wouldn't fight back effectively." Michael sat down across from his father. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find out what was happening." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, studying the check. Finally, he looked up at his son. "You know what the hardest part was? Not the money, though that was bad enough. It was feeling like I didn't matter. Like I was just some old man whose word didn't count for anything." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. "Dad, you matter. Your word counts. What happened to you was completely wrong. I know that now. But for months I felt like maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I hadn't signaled. Maybe I looked suspicious. Maybe I deserved what happened to me." Michael realized that his father's ordeal had been about more than money. It had been an attack on his dignity, his sense of self-worth, his place in the community. "Those officers are going to jail," Michael said firmly. "The department is changing its procedures because of what happened to you. And every other victim is getting their money back." Samuel nodded slowly. "What about you? This can't be good for your career, going after fellow officers." Michael had been wondering about that himself. He had already received several phone calls from officers expressing concern about the precedent he was setting. The police union representative had scheduled a meeting for Monday morning to discuss morale issues. "My career will be fine," Michael said. "And even if it isn't, some things are more important than career advancement." "Like family?" "Like family. Like doing what's right. Like remembering why I became a cop in the first place." Samuel smiled for the first time since Michael had arrived. "Your mother always said you had a good heart. She worried that the job would harden you, make you forget where you came from." "I did forget for a while. I got so focused on climbing the ladder that I lost track of what mattered." Michael leaned forward. "Dad, I want to do better. I want us to do better." Over the next hour, father and son talked more openly than they had in years. Samuel shared his frustrations about growing older in a world that seemed to value him less each year. Michael talked about the pressures of leadership and the difficulty of maintaining integrity in a system that often rewarded compromise. "There's something else," Michael said finally. "I want your help with something." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "My help?" "The department is starting a community oversight committee for asset forfeiture cases. Citizens who review seizures to make sure they're legitimate. I want you to chair the committee." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "You want me to work with the police department?" "I want you to help us be better. You understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of police power. That perspective could help us prevent other people from going through what you experienced." Samuel considered the offer. "Would I have real authority? Would my recommendations actually matter? You'd have the power to review cases, interview officers, and make binding recommendations about whether seized money should be returned. The committee's decisions would override individual officers' judgments. And you think the other officers will accept having civilians second-guess their work?" Michael smiled. "They'll accept it because I'm ordering them to accept it, and because it's the right thing to do." 3 months later, Samuel Washington sat at the head of a conference table in the police department's community room, leading the monthly asset forfeiture review meeting. The committee included Mrs. Chen, who had become an advocate for elderly rights, a local attorney who volunteered his time, and 2 other community members who had been affected by questionable seizures. The committee had already returned money to 4 families whose seizures couldn't be properly justified. More importantly, the number of seizures had dropped dramatically as officers realized their cases would face civilian scrutiny. Michael attended each meeting, listening as his father asked pointed questions and demanded clear explanations for police actions. Samuel had found his voice again, and watching him hold officers accountable for their decisions filled Michael with pride. The changes went beyond the oversight committee. The department had implemented new training programs about civil rights and proper seizure procedures. Officers now needed supervisor approval before making cash seizures over $500. Body cameras were mandatory for all traffic stops, and Michael had created a victim's advocate position to help people navigate the asset forfeiture process. The story of Samuel's case had eventually reached the local media, sparking a broader conversation about police accountability and the rights of elderly citizens. The Washington family had become symbols of both the problems within law enforcement and the possibility of meaningful reform. But for Michael, the most important change was personal. He now called his father every Sunday, visited regularly, and had learned to balance his professional responsibilities with his family relationships. Samuel had moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, and his health had improved along with his financial security. One evening, as they shared dinner at Samuel's favorite restaurant, the older man looked across the table at his son. "You know, I never thanked you properly for what you did. You don't need to thank me. Dad, I just did my job." "No," Samuel said firmly. "Your job was to protect the department, protect your career, protect the system. What you did was choose justice over job security. That took real courage." Michael thought about the officers who still wouldn't speak to him, the union representatives who questioned his leadership, the politicians who worried about his anti-police reforms. "It was the easiest decision I ever made," he said honestly. "Once I remembered what really mattered." As they drove home together, Michael realized that his father's ordeal had ultimately brought them closer than they had been in years. Samuel had learned that his son would choose family over career when it mattered. Michael had learned that real police work meant protecting the vulnerable, not the powerful. The cash seizure that had started as a routine morning drive to the bank had become a catalyst for change that rippled through their family, their department, and their community. Sometimes justice came slowly, and sometimes it required personal sacrifice. But when it finally arrived, it made everything that came before worthwhile. Samuel Washington never stopped carrying cash to the bank, but now he did it with the knowledge that someone was watching out for him. And Michael Washington continued leading his department, but with a clearer understanding of what it meant to serve and protect. The badge still carried weight, but now it carried the right kind of weight. The weight of responsibility, integrity, and the promise that justice could prevail, even when it took a little longer to arrive.